My name is Dr. Savi, and we're back with another show. This is the second of the shows that we've done. We've had a bit of a break for Christmas and the New Year and the festive seasons, whatever you're celebrating out there. So we were on just before Christmas, and we're back with the second show. Now, the show is called Seeking Within, and it's quite an interesting title in the context that it talks about what is it that inspires you as an individual. You could be somebody who, as a teacher, somebody who is really into music. Ultimately, something that has a passion that really drives you. Ultimately, it's about inspiration and motivation. They kind of go hand in hand in one sense. So today we've got a really special show for you. I'm joined by my co-host here, Mr. Gurpreet. Good to see you again.
Good to be back. Savi, how you been?
The double twosome, the troublesome twosome.
The
gruesome twosome, yeah. Hopefully it won't give you too much trouble. But it's good that you came down to the studio, and it's good to have you share in your own personal experiences as well, because you do a lot of work in Savi Arora, and it's quite interesting, the kind of daily challenges that you come across.
Yes, definitely so.
One of the things I wanted to really explore was something about Sikh history and Sikh art. And, in one sense, there's a link between art and history. They either go hand in hand, or you see a piece of art and you're inspired to know more about it. So we're also really grateful for a couple of really great guests that we got with us today. First of all, we've got Jason Askew, a very well-renowned artist.
Waheguru Ji Ki Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on your show.
Thanks very much for coming. And we've also got Amarpal Singh, who actually has been on the show before, ages and ages ago, I think last year. Or was it the year before, when we were talking about some work that you're doing with the European Union?
That's right, yeah. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Yes, we've been on the show last year, I think. So, nice to be back.
Yeah, it's good, because one of the things that you're really interested in is, we see kind of a multiple set of dimensions here. We see every day what happens in the Gurdwara, kind of things that people are interested in, and the daily challenges. We've got somebody who's really passionate about art, and we've also got someone who is really passionate about history. And it's interesting, you were saying just before the program that you've worked with historians before, haven't you? And you kind of find that combination really interesting, yeah?
Yes, it's a very good combination to have an artist and a writer working together, particularly on historical projects.
Right.
It's better that way. It creates a good balance.
So tell us a little bit about your background in terms of, sorry to interrupt, your background, but where did you get this interest from? How did you kind of acquire this sense of seeing that there was a link towards history and art?
I've always been interested in art. I went to the Chandsburg Art Ballet Music School at the age of 15, 16, and the interest arose from there. I've been working for a long time in this field, on and off, throughout my life. I've worked on newspapers, but I've always stuck to historical artwork, yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. And then what about, in this particular case, how did you get involved in, I guess, some of the art that you're involved in right now?
In terms of the Sikh art?
Yeah.
I was very interested in, the Sikh, the Anglo-Sikh wars. I first became aware of it when I found out about the Battle of Aliwal, because there's a place in South Africa called Aliwal Shoal, and that was named after Sir Harry Smith, because he was a Governor-General in South Africa after the Sikh wars in 1846. And it didn't sound like an African name. I wanted to find out, where it came from and what this meant. And then obviously I found out about Sikhs, the Sikh religion, the Sikh nation, the history of the Punjab. And I wanted to, I felt it would look very good in paintings, because it's essentially a Napoleonic battle, a Napoleonic type of struggle, yet in India, in the Punjab. Well, it's debatable. Punjab's part of India. And it's from there that I wanted to find out more. I found out more when I worked for the Gurkhas, and I did a commission for the Brigade of Gurkhas here in the UK about 6-7 years ago when I moved over here. We were working on the Indian Mutiny as a theme, or the first Indian War of Independence, 1857. And it wasn't widely known that a lot of the British Army who assaulted Delhi were in fact made up of Sikhs, the same Sikhs who they'd been fighting 5 years beforehand.
Right, because there was effectively that transition. So, Amarpal, tell us, let's go back as well. We asked Jason the question about his passion. Where did you get this kind of interest for history? What drives you every day to say, actually, I want to know a little bit more about what happened here? Obviously, Jason thought, that's interesting. What about this name? Where does it come from? Let's do a little bit of research. When did you first kind of start thinking, actually, I'm really interested in this?
Well, I think everyone's got their own interests, and I've been interested in history from a really early age. In fact, I remember when I was 6 or 7, reading books on World War II, World War One. So everyone's got their own interests, and Jason's got art. I've got history, and I just find it terribly important subject. It's something that we as a community are not really doing as much as we should about, and I think, I'd like to say most of our history is actually undiscovered at the moment. So hopefully, in the years to come, try and sort of unravel as much more as we can, really. So it's a pioneering thing. It's not something that there's not an awful lot of books about the Anglo-Sikh Wars, for instance. The number of really good books you can count on one hand. Okay. Whereas something like World War One, World War Two, there's literally thousands of books. And that's the kind of situation we need. More writers, more books on the subject.
Do you think the benefit of doing that is? I'll ask Gurpreet this question. Mm-hmm. Do you think history is important to society? Do you think it's a way of breaking down barriers between different communities? I mean, you cut us, we're all the same. Doesn't matter what colour you are. But the thing is, we have differences in terms of maybe the strength through diversity comes in the fact that we come from different places. But we're all in one society in one sense. But there's this. I heard somebody recently saying that there's a difference between integration and assimilation. Integration where people respect each other for who they are, and assimilation is when effectively, in one sense, you've lost your identity. I know it's a debatable point, but ultimately, do you think the role of Gurdwara, is to provide that level of education as well as providing support to people that come in?
Well, the Gurdwara definitely has a role in teaching, and history is part of teaching. We as Sikhs need to know what our past is to understand why we are here in the present and what our role is in the present. If we ignore our history, we start to ignore our teachings. In particular, when you start looking at Sikh history and the Sikh battles, not only just during the Guru's periods, but after the Guru's periods, at the time of Banda Singh Bahadur, the strategies used, they're quite fascinating, and you actually start thinking about, the times that people were in, what their issues were. Quite often we take a look at these and we look at it from our perspective, that the comfortable life we're in nowadays. We don't realize that, for Banda Singh Bahadur to take his army to Sarand actually took such a long time, and they actually split into different groups, and they were working and to keep their army together, to earn money and to earn food as they got to Sarand. It wasn't just some easy thing that suddenly just happened. There's a lot of logistics behind it, and you don't start to realize that until you start to actually look into the history and start to see the timescales of the time it actually took. And also with the other battles that took place during Maharaja Ranjit Singh's times, with his general Hari Singh Nalwa, and the tactics used. Sometimes the odds were against them, but how they managed to overcome those odds and win the battle.
How important that is that? I guess something's important if you feel passionate about it and you've developed an interest in it. You might, like me, for example, and you like different kinds of music. We like jazz, we like soul. We're interested in that, so therefore we follow that, right?
Yes.
But how do you think the Gurdwara should create a sense of interest? How do you? Well, I remember when I was a kid at school and we were playing, and this guy said, "Right, listen to this tape. It's a great tape." And I went home and I listened to it, and I really got into the music after that. But then, is that the role of the Gurdwara to say, actually, here is aspects of history. Here are some paintings. Here are some pictures. Here are some leaflets that talk about your history. And then, therefore, it might inspire kids to want to know more.
Yeah, the role of the Gurdwara is to provide the basis of opportunity. Just as you were saying with music, there are many different tastes. Some people are going to get into history, some are not. Some would be interested in other things. But the role is to provide opportunity. That way, Sangat members can come and get things started. And if there is, a lot of Sangat who are interested in doing something historical, then definitely Gurdwara management should push to encourage that and provide facility for that. In a way, we at the Gurdwara are like an incubator. Therefore, if someone comes with an idea, we see how can we develop that. We've got the infrastructure, they've got the idea, and it's a partnership.
But you need a committee that's open enough to those kind of concepts.
Yes, you do.
And also willing to spend the money on
it does
on
require money to be spent, and it does require time. But doing these things is what actually goes probably. When you look at Gurdwara management, it's quite simple to just stick to the routine. It's safe, you can't go wrong, and it's easy. But when you start to step out of your comfort zones, that's when you come to the challenges. But that's also where you have the greatest aspect of learning, not just as a committee, but for your Sangat too.
Yeah. I mean, I guess one of the things in the States that's quite interesting, where they've got the Sikh Research Institute and they do publications. They've got a Punjabi Digital Library. They've got some initiatives to help look at the past, kind of record historical references, and then it's there for everyone to kind of get that, because they think it's important to preserve heritage. In one sense, what you're doing, Jason, is that you're interpreting, you're doing research, you're working with a historian, and then you're able to reproduce a scene. No?
Yes.
Is that not the method that you use?
Yes, it is. I've just got to say something about the aspect of art. It's not just illustration. I'm not just sort of regurgitating facts like, in 1846 such and such happened, a battle here and this and that. I mean, it's like a military history sort of monologue. It's like, oh, go on, whatever. Like who's interested? I mean, historians will be, but most people out there, it's like, who cares? To me, what really stands out about this, it's not so much whether it's a 1984 or whether it's a battle in the Anglo-Sikh Wars, it's the spirit of people. That's really what I'm trying to bring across. Now, the thing, I mean, obviously I'm not a Sikh as such, I'm not really religious at all in any sense, in terms of organized religion, but I do believe in spiritualism, and what comes across to me, that there's a very strong spiritual angle in terms of Sikhism, particularly with the way the Sikhs stood up first against the Muslim oppression and then against British annexation and oppression. What I'm trying to capture in these pictures is the fighting spirit of the Sikh Khalsa, really, and of the Akalis.
Or maybe in one sense, not necessarily, it is fighting, but it's also fighting for freedom and fighting for liberty and fighting for, not to put words in your mouth, but, for the context that it's about what is right. And not to be oppressed.
That's absolutely, the core of what I'm trying to bring across. Yes, I mean they're not fighting for a government. They're not fighting to impose a system on anyone. They're fighting for their own personal freedom. And there's a very strong anarchic message in that, and that's what I like. I think that they're fighting for their way of life. They're fighting not to be railroaded by anyone, and fighting not to be sort of turned from free people into a nation of servants. Before I got involved in this, I did a lot of work on the Anglo-Zulu Wars, obviously coming from South Africa. And essentially what happened there was that the British marched into Zululand, what was known as Natal Zululand. And this was they were also, I wouldn't say they were a libertarian nation as such. I mean, they were quite sort of authoritarian in their own way, the Zulu nation, Shaka and all that. But the result of that war was that they were turned from nation of warriors and people had a sense of self into a nation of servants and garden boys that were just there to provide, basically to be there for the convenience and beck and call of a white community. And I think that's wrong. And I get the same feeling that this happened in the Punjab with the Muslims when Sikhism
the Mughal Empire.
Yes, the Mughal Empire. They didn't want people in the Punjab or Sikhs to have their own sense of self. They just wanted to assimilate them. And if they didn't do it, well, you've seen all the pictures in the Gurdwaras. They were chopped in half, boiled alive, God knows what. I think, so it's that angle that I'm really pushing for, is spirit, the spirit to stand up for yourself. And
I think what's interesting also is the fact that that's a very good point about standing up, but it's also not necessarily standing up for yourself, but it's also about standing up for other people. Now, Guru Tegh Bahadur is a brilliant example of somebody who gave his life for the freedom of other religions to be able to do their own, be free to practice their own religion, right? So And it's very rare to find that in any society where, even Guru Gobind Singh, who all his 4 sons and, his mother and his family, obviously his father, Guru Tegh Bahadur, all of them were lost in terms of their lives because they felt it was important for the freedom for all the communities at the time that no one should be ethnically cleansed. And even in the last 20, 30 years, you see ethnic cleansing happening, in Eastern Europe and some of those countries that had that issue. It's just that mankind doesn't seem to learn, does he? He says, well, okay, we'll just dominate that. We just take it over. We'll just take it apart. But I think Sikh community are the ones that stand up for other people.
I mean, yeah, I agree with this totally. And it's not just way back in the 1600s, fighting, 1680s, fighting the Mughals. I've been doing some work on Bhindranwale in 1984, and to me it's the very same message. Bhindranwale said the same thing, that everyone should be free to practice their own religion, basically be good people. And I think that's a very important message. In that sense, he wasn't institutionalized at all. He was deinstitutionalized, and because most religions, seek to actually, control people. I mean, whatever they are. I mean, it's a failing when a religion becomes institutionalized. It's not the true message. Right. But I mean, obviously, there are as many different views of religion as there are, sort of fish in the sea. Each one is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all heading for the same goal, though. I was going to say, Amapal, tell us a little bit about some of the work that you've done, specifically about the book that Jason must have picked up and said, I must give Amapal a call,
Yeah, well, I always had a hankering for, writing books. And what I noticed was that there wasn't an awful lot of new books coming out on the Anglo-Sikh Wars. And even though there's a need for it, and not just in our community, but in the European community. In fact, most of the sales from my books are actually to English people, really? And a lot of the emails I get, a lot of the contacts I get on Facebook and stuff, they're from Europeans, from English. And in fact, I made a very good German friend, through the book. And so it's not just our community, there's a lot of interest worldwide. So the last sort of major book that came out prior to mine was around about 1970. So that was 40 years ago.
Wow. You can get your books on the Kindle, right?
Sorry?
We can get your books on the Kindle, right?
You can't get it on the Kindle at the moment. Hopefully you can in the future.
Okay.
But
you said you were working on one for the Kindle, weren't you?
I'm working on I'm working on a new book, which we're hoping to get out on the Kindle as well.
Right.
My current publishing company, they're a little bit slow on getting onto the Kindle. They're a military sort of specialist company, and they like doing hardback books rather than the Kindle. But there's arguments, pro and against Kindle, especially when it comes to non-fiction. Most people, for non-fiction, they like a physical book. Okay. So, but that's not to say Kindle books won't sell. But anyway, yeah, that's how I got into it, and that goes for a lot of the Sikh history. There's just nothing there at the moment. All of our records are in Lahore. All the Darbar records, Maharaja Ranjit Singh's period records. They're in Lahore. They're not written in English or Punjabi. They're written in Persian. So, 99% of our history is undecoded at the moment,
Really?
simply because none of us know Persian.
That's incredible.
Farsi, that's right. And so it's really tragic. Our own history is something we can't read. So hopefully, something will be done about that.
I was going to say, what can be done about it? Is there an interest at the level, or the SCPC and people like that? Are they interested in that context? Do they want to preserve buildings? Do they want to preserve history? Do they want to commission a project to go away and try and go to Lahore or get some of these items, translate them, publish them? Where does that drive come from? If the whole point of this program is seeking within, right? You know,
Yeah.
where are we seeking? Who are we seeking that's going to do this stuff? Do we have to ask for that somehow?
Regrettably, we don't have much funding at all for these sort of things. You know, what it needs is some sort of large body to, you know, come to, you know, people like us who are interested in these sort of things.
Right.
Send us over to Lahore, you know, finance us and, let us stay there for a few years. And it's not just a few years, you know, this is a lifetime's work, and it needs not just one person, it needs loads of people. You know, it's like trying to go into the British Museum, you know, one person, and trying to catalogue everything and write about everything. There's just too much there.
Right, yeah.
So we need more, philanthropists, really, and maybe, you know, the Gurdwaras can, get into sort of funding, you know, local sort of talent, if you like, or whatever, or financing, you know, art as well. You know, that's another thing we're not sort of aiming at in our community at the moment.
What I think is quite interesting, we were talking about this earlier on, and I think there's also a link to Gurdwaras as well, but, where things are commissioned, you know, Gurdwaras may commission a piece of work. So it's really more was a question for both of you, really. I mean, for you, you know, for someone working in the Gurdwara, then it's interesting you've got paintings there. It might be interesting to see different paintings from different parts of history, but obviously it's going to take money to kind of, you know, you've got to pay someone to do that.
Yes.
On the other part, a lot of your commissions have come from the MOD, right? Yes. Particularly, it would be good. So I guess I've got two questions. One is for you to say, where's the pictures in the Gurdwara? And for you, I was going to ask you really, you've been asked by, departments to do commissions, right? I mean, there's a drive obviously coming from there. Where's that motivation coming from?
Normally I either approach British regiments on my own, or they approach me on their own.
Okay.
It's done sort of privately. There's no drive as such. It's up to you.
Okay.
I mean, if we move on to the issue of the Gurdwaras, actually we at Central Gurdwara, we did identify a space which we've got where we would actually love to actually commission a painting. So, you know, we need to think of what do we want on that painting. We do want something historical. Interestingly, one of the sketches that Jason has done over there is of Captain Hardit Singh Malik with the Sopwith camel. He was one of the early presidents of our Gurdwara Sahib. In fact, it was his daughter who Khushwant Singh met here in London and ultimately married.
Really?
So there is history even in the Gurdwaras. Well, I know, definitely Central Gurdwara because we're from 1908, but, there is history within our community here in the UK, which is just waiting to be explored. We do have a military history.
Very good. I mean, coming back to the commission thing, I really would love to get you to tell us the story about that painting that you did and how you decided to not necessarily follow out the orders that were given to you.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. Too many late nights doing yoga. That was to do the the Battle of Aliwal.
Right.
I got a commission for it was going to be for a British regiment or a British individual, a military guy, to do the Battle of Aliwal, the 16th Lancers. And I did the painting. It was a very large picture, 6 foot. But I thought that the Sikhs and the Akalis were so interesting in the painting that I emphasized them rather than the British Lancers. And when when they actually saw the painting, the client said to me that I'd have to take the Sikhs out because I'd overemphasized them, and he wanted more of the emphasis to be on the 16th Lancers, the British regiment. And I said, no, I won't do that. And I thought that the Akalis and the Sikhs were the most interesting part of the picture. Otherwise, it just looks like another military painting. And I've done so many of them, I thought it was starting to get a bit dull. So I said, well, no, I'm not actually going to change this. It'll mess up the painting. And I thought he was wrong, because, again, I like the idea of this Akali from the Punjab standing up and giving whoever was invading his country hell for leather. It's a good image. So I eventually said, no, I won't change it. So they said to me, fine, we won't buy it. So I said, okay, well, take a hike. I've had enough of you,
Okay. So you
sometimes you've got to stand up for your
sense
own.
of principles, absolutely.
Yeah, it's not very nice and you've got to pay rent and all that.
Right.
People get, but I mean, you've got to, the buck stops here sometimes. Anyway, it was a very good stand to make, a very noble stand, but probably not a very sensible financial decision. However, luckily, about 7-8 weeks later, I got an email from a Sikh collector in Canada, a dentist, and he said, no, he loves it, he wants it. So I thought, oh, thank God, So I had to tidy it up a bit because, I'd got so fed up, I'd taken the picture and chucked it in the backyard, enough of this. Because no one at that time was really coming forward there were no British people interested, Anglo-Sikh war enthusiasts, and there weren't any Sikhs interested. So that email really gave me a lot of faith. I thought, God, I'm not wasting my time with this. Because, it's a very lonely occupation to paint this stuff. Because you're really living in your own head. I mean, I'm a pal, know from writing. You sit there and some days you wonder, what the hell am I doing?
You get is it like writers get writer's block and stuff?
No, I don't get writer's block. You get sort of depressed, and you think, well, you're on your own and you're living in your own little world and you start to go a bit mad.
Right.
You think you're a bit loopy. But I mean, anyway, I've found ways of dealing with that too.
Yoga.
I mean, talking about the Kalis, I mean, just if you look at these two paintings which are behind us, and you've really shown the Kali Nihang horseman and, charging down, and you've, shown so much details like the Karaze war. How did you find out about the Kali Nihangs?
The Dasta Baga, and
yes.
I know, I found out through doing yoga, I found out about that group that do Shasta Vidya. Was it Nidar Singh? Yes, and I went along to some of his classes, and everyone was there in their turbans, and they're all kicking each other's heads in. I thought, oh, this is really interesting. How do they do that? But I mean, I actually liked. I mean, that was a superficial judgment. I mean, actually, when you got into it, there's a lot of knowledge there, and he's trying to keep. Again, he's basically doing the martial arts, what Amapal is doing in writing, and I suppose I'm trying to do with painting is keep a sense of Sikh tradition, Sikh and Vedic tradition alive. Really.
Yeah, I guess there's a grey area between what's religion and what's culture, right? I mean. Sometimes they're very distinct. I think often they're distinct, but I think there are certain things that come across, which is like a martial art will be something that will be inherent within that religion. And some people choose to do it, and some people don't. But it just goes. And there's a lot of discipline in that gutka or whatever. It's a powerful martial art.
Yeah, no, I definitely thought so, and I like the sort of the illusions. I mean, obviously it's a bit of a problem with 1984, but what I came across was that, a lot of the forms are based on sort of Durga or, was it Vishnu and, the fighting forms, but of course, obviously that's a bit of a problem with 1984.
So when you mentioned 1984, I mean, obviously you've mentioned Janelle Singh Bhindranwale, right? What about... one of the things that I think we had a brief discussion about this was, the thing that's in the back of all of the Sikhs is I think it's 28 years this year, or 29 years, I think, since the Holocaust that took place in November time. Right? There are movies that have been made, there's literature that's been written. I think art has a part to play in that, in terms of communicating the atrocities that took place during that period. Do they preserve an element of keeping that point in history alive? Because the Jewish community have done extremely well to make sure that people know about it. There's a Holocaust museum in the US. There are movies that are made about it. But we don't seem to have a lot after 29 years, 28 years. We don't have a lot of. I feel really sad sometimes when kids don't know about it. And then sometimes because there's no media about it, the actual real reason why the real perpetrators still walk around, but they don't. But and as time passes, it seems to be forgotten about. Well,
perhaps I can answer that. I think in our community we're not targeting enough on the arts. Whether it be authors or artists. I don't know of any good artists in our community at the moment. And Jason's doing this great stuff here, and I'm hoping that people all sort of get some sort of inspiration from this, But in terms of 1984, very, very few artists out there, and some people are doing some work, but there's just not enough, I think it's one of our failings of our community is that we just don't direct kids towards, arts and sports and, books, these sort of things which are maybe, financially less lucrative, but they're very, very important,
I think it's maybe the...
Culture becomes very one-dimensional if you don't have these things,
I think we're in that, maybe the third generation, really. Even you look at it from the 1950s, I think one of the issues might be is that we're still living in, and there's nothing, we're not saying anything bad about this, but we're survivalist, There's always this issue about, some people have got people to support in another country, or they've established themselves here and it's taking time for them to do it, or what kind of background they've come from, whether or not they feel they need a solid financial base before they can continue. But then, we have this 15 million pound Gurdwaras, so there is money in the system, or 5 million pound schools, and I'm sure there are opportunities within those kind of curriculums to explore more. But what I would say is that maybe, as a suggestion, we've got an opportunity to maybe contact, the Department of Skills and Education and say to them, look, when you're doing a curriculum on history, maybe it's a good idea to talk about Queen Victoria and her relationship with Maharaja Dalip Singh. Why are there watercolours of Dalip Singh in Osborne House on the Isle of Wight? Not a lot of people know that until they turn up there. You're not told about that. I mean, we're born here. We've been to the schools here. I don't think I remember anything being told to me. Maybe there's a bit more now about the involvement of the British in India. I don't know.
Yeah, unfortunately, during the last sort of 3-4 decades, the school curriculum's really changed. In the old days, they used to talk much more about the empire, and they probably did cover, the Anglo-Sikh Wars. I don't know, what they used to do in the 30s and 40s, but I'm sure there was some coverage.
Right.
Whereas these days it's more modern history, so we're suffering from that actually.
And is it suffering the fact that there's a lack of understanding between the different cultures that are actually here, or the different types of people that are now living in the UK?
There's only so much they can cover in the school curriculum. I think that's the problem. So they try and cover very sort of populist things, and even if they did cover, Sikh history, they'd cover it in very bite-sized chunks. So it's really up to us as a community, maybe up to the Gurdwaras as well, to get out quality productions, books and movies and popular art, like this, things that inspire people.
There's also, you mentioned popular art. I've told recently I downloaded on the Kindle, was like a comic which was talking about a Sikh battle as well, and that was quite interesting.
Yes, there's all sorts of art. Jason's probably knows more about this kind of artwork than I do. But when I was a kid, I used to go through loads of comics.
Me too.
Spider-Man and all these sort of things. We don't have that. In our culture, we don't.
The reason I actually got interested in Sikh history was actually reading a comic on Hari Singh Nalwa. And it was, I think, a Amarjita Katha type comic or something, and it was quite interesting. But that's what actually got my interest into Sikh history.
But it wasn't
a
UK
battles.
publication, though, was it?
No, that was. I think that was from India, definitely.
Yeah. I just want to say something maybe slightly controversial about artwork. What I've noticed about a lot of paintings, talking about paintings, obviously. The tradition of oil painting is very much a Western development. I'm talking about oil painting, not all painting, oil painting.
Right.
Okay, because obviously art is universal, but very often art is directly tied into propaganda. A lot of the art that was produced for the Vatican is Catholic Church propaganda.
Right.
And same for military art. The military was very much the that was the religion of the British Empire, a military achievement, muscular Christianity. And it's a cult. It's also, you'll know about that, And, I don't really like it much. The point is, most of the paintings you see are pictures of the imperial power, whether they're French or British or doing their thing. And they'll tend to be, I've got to bring a racial element into it because it's true. They tend to be British soldiers. Now, what's not known, or white soldiers, what's not widely known is that there are a lot of, actually, Indian soldiers, for instance, on the British side, fighting in both the Second World War. And this is Gurkhas, Sikhs, Rajputs, Gujaratis, all sorts of people. And they're largely invisible. It's almost like they've been sort of edited, airbrushed out of history.
I think it's only recently during the victory parades or even the memorials, we see it during Remembrance Sunday, that there is actually some information given with regards to, by the way, that this is a reef for the Australians, this is a reef for, so it's not just brown people, it could be people from different parts
of
Commonwealth, the
people.
Commonwealth, yeah.
I mean, myself,
not necessarily, they weren't necessarily British, they could have been from Singapore, they could have been from Australia, they could have been from India, but they don't necessarily bring that out, No,
that's quite true. I mean, very often you have to make, I have to make that correction for people. Like there'll be someone will say to me, oh, this is a picture of, the British soldiers at Passchendaele. And you actually have to say, excuse me, they're Canadian.
Oh, right, okay. Right.
No, actually, that's an Australian division. No, actually, at Vimy Ridge, that was such and such. Well, no, actually, the first gas attack, that's actually, again, those are the Canadian Highlanders or, the New Zealanders or, same with Gallipoli. It's not well known that there were Sikhs or French or Gurkhas at Gallipoli. It's always, for some reason, you're always having to push. I get the feeling you're always having to push against something. You're always pushing. I mean, like even that picture, that one you mentioned of the Sopwith camel, Malik, the Sikh pilot. Again, I feel like I'm pushing against a wall, forcing people to see this.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Can I just say that it's this kind of art is largely Western art, and they're used to, sort of European models, if you like. So, Jason's actually breaking new ground here, and I'm sure there's a lot of other artists who are sort of, thinking, do we really want to show sort of European regiments all the time? Why can't we show, other races, other types of people?
This is an incredible sketch that you've done here as well. Talk us through these.
Okay. I just want to, in this one, let's see, can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Okay. There's two aspects to this. This is a sketch for Sikhs in the Western Desert in World War II. Originally, I got the reference material and I drew the 8th Army, British soldiers, basically in their truck. Right. But then I thought, well, why not put, Indian soldiers or Sikhs in there, simply because you don't see that image that often.
Yeah.
Now, what's not widely known is, I don't know how familiar people are with the history of the Western, the Battle of El Alamein and all that kind of thing.
Right, probably not.
But I don't know, it's not widely known that, Montgomery, the victor of Alamein, he didn't like Indian soldiers. I mean, when I did the commission for the Gurkhas, they actually said to me that the brigade of Gurkhas and sort of the Sikhs and the Indian brigades, they were never given a big part in any of Montgomery's battles. They were sort of in reserve or in support. They weren't. So it was always it's not often they actually had a decisive role to play.
Right.
Obviously in Burma, sort of Battle of Imphal, Kohima, the situation was different because, well, the Japanese were knocking at the gates of India. This is it's almost like a cultural attitude, and it's a pity that it exists. So and the only way you're going to break it down is by visually pushing these images in front of people. That's why paintings are important. A picture says 1,000 words.
Do you think, like, in one sense, there's a fiction element and a non-fiction element? When I say non-fiction, effectively, you're dealing with facts, you're dealing with figures, you're dealing with actual things that took place. And when you look at something like The English Patient, which was written and it depicted the
Sikh sapper,
yeah, absolutely. Played by the character's name is Kim. He's a lieutenant. He ends up in, I think it's in Italy, and he's defusing bombs. And there's some interesting things that come from that in terms of a theme. First of all, he's a Sikh. Secondly, he's actually a leader of a group, right? So he's put in a position where he is actually the individual that.
He was an officer. He was an officer, position of responsibility.
And there was a tremendous amount of respect for him. that he was able to do his job in the most amazing way. Now, that's a fictional character. So is there also an opportunity for people that maybe who are into writing books, bring about heroes of the time, or they kind of read and they say, actually, they're inspired by your book, and they go, actually, maybe I could write a story about this, and then, in theory, it could be illustrated, or it could be, you could design the cover, and, so when someone looks at it. But I think maybe the problem might be is that, when you look at the literature shelves, how much do you see that's, romantic, and, there isn't anything necessarily and maybe that's a fault of the fact that, the publication houses are dominating what sits on the shelves rather than not being exposed to anything different, which could be really interesting, like, The English Patient, Oscar winner,
Well, just going.
The movie doesn't actually talk that much about the character, but the book does. Yeah.
Well, one thing I would like to say is that during the First World War, the British High Command, if you like, didn't actually want Indian soldiers fighting Europeans.
Yeah.
And the reason for that was that if the Indian soldiers did well, they'd start getting ideas. If we can beat European soldiers, then why are we being ruled by the Europeans?
Interesting.
So for the first few years they were very reluctant. So and that sort of carried on into the Second World War as well. So they were never really put into positions of responsibility. So that's the main reason that they weren't put into the sort of almost the most important sort of positions in a battle. So, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Just what Abhupal's saying is very relevant because I've just got a commission come through on Friday. It was organised through the well-known Sikh martial arts and cage fighter guy, Prab Bahra.
Was it MMA? Is it?
Yes,
Yeah.
but he's a friend of mine, and it's been commissioned by the Bahra collection, and it's actually to paint the Battle of Festubert in 1915, where Lal Singh won the Indian Order of Merit Medal, and Lieutenant Smythe won the Victoria Cross. In fact, the Sikhs should have been given a Victoria Cross as well, but they didn't. They basically carried boxes of hand grenades through to a frontline trench that was under pressure.
Wow, that's amazing.
But what's not well known is that the Sikh battalion, the 15th Ludhiana Sikhs, were actually sent in to reinforce a failed attack by the HLI, the Highland Light Infantry. So there's a clear case of an Indian regiment being sent to the assistance of a British regiment that was in trouble.
Right, yeah, it's some incredible history there, isn't there? It's just that, there's so many things that you're talking about, even, so many people in the street don't actually know what's going on,
Well, I think that's the problem, Savi, that there's really no research going on in this field. If you look at the number of books on Sikhs in World War One, you could probably count them on one hand, if that. There's just nobody out there doing research. We're getting the anniversary of the opening of World War One coming up now, so there's a sort of flurry of interest. So I know there's some books coming out now, but till now there just hasn't been that much interest. So hopefully, the anniversary of World War One is going to provoke a lot more interest and hopefully a lot more research as well.
A memorial idea.
That's right. Yes, I mean there is this idea of a memorial to the almost the 80. I think there's just slightly more than 80,000 Sikhs who died during World War One and World War Two, and that's really needed.
I think
We
there's
just
a
don't have
citadel
that.
in Brighton, I think they've got already, haven't they? They've got that.
a new one.
Oh, okay. Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, we don't really have a sort of iconic, Sikh only memorial at the moment, and. Hopefully, we can get somebody like Jason, or even Jason himself, to actually to actually design one. And I know I've seen one of your paintings or drawings, to that effect. Really, really good.
Oh, okay. Right.
Maybe we can show that.
Yeah, sure. It's the heavy one, isn't it? Oh,
That's a sketch for a World War One idea.
right.
But, although that's a painting, one of the ambitions I have is to produce a large sculpture over life size,
That's
maybe
incredible.
1.5 life size
Yeah.
of Sikh soldiers in battle, because I think
Yeah.
that would be good. It's got to be figurative and representational. I think it's it's difficult for people who are not familiar with art to look at abstract images.
Right.
I mean, if you're visually literate, it's easy because you can understand abstract art. But for most people out there, they actually need a figurative representation. So that's something I'd like to do as well, or we'd like to do.
Okay. Well, we're getting a signal now that we're getting to the end. I just want to say thanks very much for coming in and spending all your time, taking time to do research as well with regards to looking at what would be nice to bring in and show people in the public. Before we go, very quickly, an email address that you may have that to contact you. It would be really good if someone wants to send you an email and say, hey, I like that, can I have a copy of that, or I'd like you to do me one, you know?
Oh, yeah, okay. My name is jason.askew@btinternet.com.
That's Jason.
jason.askew@btinternet.com.
Okay, well that's great. Thanks, Jason. Right, I get an advert in there for you. You know,
Thanks.
Especially with all the great work you're doing. Brilliant. And Paul, thank you for coming in. I really appreciate your time. Keep plugging away with the Kindle and all those other books. We need you, and we need you to do all that. And we need you, Gurpreet, to help champion the cause in the Gurdwaras. Set an example for the other ones to say, look, this is a brilliant piece of work. You know, this is something that we need to do. This is something that we really need.
Sorry, just to interrupt, Savi. This is actually the anniversary of the Battle of Shilianwala.
It is.
So it's very appropriate that we're actually discussing these issues today. I'll just pass it over to Gurpreet now.
Yeah, I'm just going to sign off and say thanks very much for joining us. I appreciate it. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.